Welcome to Generation Inspired, exploring the people and ideas shaping tomorrow.
What if one of the biggest myths we've ever been told is that school is the best way for children to learn? Today's guest is Dr. Peter Gray. He's a psychologist, researcher, and author of the best-selling book Free to Learn. Now, for decades, Peter has studied how children actually learn when they're given something that most schools rarely allow, which is freedom. So that freedom to explore, to play, to follow their curiosity. And what this research shows is so fascinating. When young people are trusted to direct their own learning, they often become more motivated, capable, and resilient than we ever imagined. So, if we want a generation that can think for themselves, adapt to change, and solve real problems, maybe the real question isn't how we improve school. Maybe it's whether we need to rethink it altogether. Today, as you just heard, we are here with the amazing Peter Gray. Welcome, Peter.
Well, thank you for having me here. It's nice to be here.
Oh, thank you. And, as a parent who has definitely been dragged through the trenches with my son in schooling, and actually as someone that has gone out there over the last few months and been investigating, all of the different alternative schooling options, this is going to be really interesting, I feel, as a chat. And I know that the research and your work is just amazing and it spans for years. But I thought I would love to start by going all the way back in time to the pivotal moment in your life that kind of started you on this path. And I have to say here, as a parent that has ended up in a principal's office quite often, this resonates. So would you like to just start us there on that day in the principal's office and we'll hear the story?
Sure. This is a story I tell near the beginning of my book, Free to Learn, and it truly is what led me to the path of research that I've been on now for quite a number of decades. So this was a long time ago. But I was a young professor at Boston College doing neuroscience, studying the binding of certain hormones in the brains of rats and mice. Very different kind of research than I eventually became more passionate about. So meanwhile, I had a young son who had been quite happy, seemed to be a well-adjusted boy up until when he started school. And then we lived near what was everybody regarded as a very fine suburban public school. He went to that school. Beginning in kindergarten, he would come home and say how much he hates it, that it's prison, that we're sending him to prison, you know.
Oh, wow.
And so we heard that, and we tried to just talk him out of it, his mother and I. We weren't we weren't thinking about any kind at that time, homeschooling, other options were not particularly available, and homeschooling wouldn't have been a good option for us for a variety of reasons anyway. So, we just tried to encourage him to go back, and we went all the way to 4th grade, all the way through most of 4th grade, and every year we would try to think, well, maybe the next year will be better, he'll have a different teacher, there'll be different classmates, and
Yeah.
so on and so forth, but it never got better. And then, it reached a crisis in, 4th grade, and that's when the principal's office we were called into the principal's office a lot. I think the teachers thought this must be our fault, his parents' fault, and maybe it was. I mean, maybe it was. I mean, we treated him with a lot of respect, and we liked to listen to him.
Oh,
We, believe that that he's capable of making a lot of his own decisions and does best when he's making his decisions. So he wasn't used to an environment where he's told what to do and has to do it that way if it doesn't make sense to him to do it that way. I mean, he one of the things they complained about, believe it or not, was he thinks he's an adult. He acts like an adult. Oh, can you imagine that? How how dare he act like an adult? So that's, so the and the he would do he did very well on the test, but he, always did his homework in a very different way than the teacher wanted him to do it. Because the way he explained it, that's the only way he could make it interesting. And he also would rebel, in all sorts of ways that I'm sure were very, confounding to the teacher, and, I mean, you couldn't possibly run a typical school classroom with a bunch of kids like my son in it. It just would not work. You'd have to go to an entirely different model of school um, because basically, you say to the classroom, uh, "Now, children, will you all take out your pencils and start to do your do this worksheet?" And he would say something like, "Well, thank you for asking, but no."
It was polite.
He would he would treat he would treat it as if it was a question rather than an order. It was phrased as a question. So, and they also had a policy at that time, which they called the open door policy, which really didn't mean literally that you could go out the door whenever you want. But he took it that way. He said, "But I understand you have an open door policy, so I'm going home now." So, yeah, you know, and then when it came time, I maybe in 3rd grade to learn how to use capital letters and punctuation, he decided that it was time to start writing like the poet E. E. Cummings, who would put capital letters and punctuation wherever he wished, so
Oh
it
my
was
god.
clearly rebellion, and he just was whether it was doing it for his own sake to make life interesting there, or whether he was doing it truly to annoy the teacher, and I think it was probably the latter, he was that was it. So finally in 4th grade, it was kind of close to the end of 4th grade, it really reached a crisis point, and the school proposed that we have a meeting with him in the principal's office where there would be his teacher, there was an assistant teacher at the time, the principal, the assistant principal, and
Oh god.
a school
Everybody.
psychologist, a special another psychologist that was brought in for, a regional psychologist for this, all of us would
Oh
be meeting
wow.
together with my little son, 9 years old at that time. And the idea was we were all going to give him a message that he has to do what he's told to do in school, that he has no choice about it. And so we all said our piece in this uniform way, something like 7 or 8 big adults all standing up against little 9-year-old my little 9-year-old son, telling him what to do. And he looked at us all after we'd said our piece, and he said, "Go to hell."
Oh my god. Oh, I love this guy already. What a son. Were you proud or
So
you were like, "Oh my goodness"?
yeah, so, yeah, I looked at his mother, my late wife, and she looked at me, and we could see we both had tears in our eyes, and we knew at that moment that he had won and that we needed to be on his side, not against him. We needed to figure out some alternatives to school for him. We needed to, just as we respected him at home, we needed to, in other things, we needed to respect his opinion on this. And, um, and so that really changed my career because here's what then happened. We looked for alternative schools. We were living on what at that time, a fairly low salary of an assistant professor. And we couldn't really have afforded the typical private schools that existed in the area. We looked at some of them, although we may have been able to, some of them said that he could get a scholarship there, and so maybe we could afford it. But we would go even to these sort of progressive private schools, and he would say afterwards, "Well, you know, it's a nicer prison, but it's still a prison." And, and then finally, we went to this school that was, located about 2 miles from where we lived then, which at that time, was regarded as fairly easy walking distance for a 9 or 10-year-old kid, and, we had resisted looking at it. I had always been curious, to be honest, in looking at it. His mother was not. She thought it was really too radically different kind of a school, but we finally went and, looked at it and, with our son, and he, after looking around, and he said something like, "Well, if this is true, if they're not just putting on a show here, this is what a school should be."
Oh,
And, and so it turns out that his mother, really adapted to the change even faster than I did, even though she was resistant in the beginning. Seeing him happy, and when he started going to the school and he would come home happy instead of angry, it was such a relief. We had our little boy back again. We had, the happy, lively, curious, playful kid was back again. And so then when he started, so this is a school that is as different from typical school as you can imagine, and yet still be a school. It is necessarily in the United States a private school because there's no way anybody could get public money for a school this different from what schools are believed to be. But it's a school that accepts children from age 4 on through high school age. It does not segregate children by age. It does not assign children to any particular spaces. Children can go anytime, anywhere. Kids are free to spend their time as they wish. The school is run officially by the school meeting, which consists of all the students, whether they're 4 years old or 18 years old, and staff members, no matter age. So each person has one vote. All the school rules are made at that meeting. None of the rules have anything to do with education. They all have to do with just the kinds of rules you need for fairly large group of people to get along with one another. Rules against littering, rules that if you take something out, you have to put it away, rules about, there's a personal rights rule that says that if I'm doing something to you that you don't want me to do, you have to say no. And if I don't stop and you've said no in a serious tone of voice, I've violated your personal rights. They're enforced by judicial procedure, this sort of model after the jury system, the American jury system. The actual philosophy of the founders of the school is that they wanted a school in which children have the rights and responsibilities of democratic citizens. The belief was if we're going to raise people to be democratic citizens in what, at least at that time, we thought of as America being a democratic society, they need to experience democracy as they're growing up, and the school is a place for them to experience democracy. The belief was that learning would take care of itself. In a setting where children can follow their own interests, where there's lots of interesting things to do, where there's children of all ages doing various different things. The kids are going to figure out what they want to know, what they might need to know in their vision of their own life and future, and they'll learn it. And so that's the philosophy of the school. There are not even courses offered at the school, although if a group of kids decides that they want a course, they can organize one themselves and probably usually talk a staff member into leading it if they want a staff member to lead it. But it only goes as long as the kids want it.
yeah.
And it's so in that sense, it's really run by the kids, and the staff member is sort of just there at their request, But so that and the staff members don't call themselves teachers because they don't believe they do any more teaching than anybody else. They don't even call themselves facilitators because again, that sort of implies that they have a responsibility for helping the children learn, whereas they do help the children learn, but they don't want that to be kind of regarded as an official responsibility. That if a child asks them for help, they'll help just because this is part of being a human being and sharing and you try to help people when they ask for help. So but that's the way the school operates. So how did this change my career? It changed my career because, although I was very delighted that my son was delighted, and I wasn't too much worried about his learning. He's just a kid who naturally learns no matter where he is. But, I was a little worried about this for him, that, suppose he stays there through what elsewhere would be called all of high school,
Yeah.
and then he decides, that he wants some career that requires going to college. Can he go to
Yes.
college from such a school? And so I began to ask about that, and I got some sort of anecdotes and stories, and there were a few that, I learned about who had gone on to college. I was also a little concerned if you sort of walk through the school, not too surprisingly, where people are free, you see kids doing a lot of art and music. And so I began to think, all right, do they all grow up to become starving artists and musicians
Yes.
living in
The
their
parent
parents'
worry.
basement because they can't make a living?
Yes.
You know? So, and so that was also a little bit of a nagging concern I had.
Yeah.
And so I ended up doing a formal study of the graduates of the school. I first tried, this was not
Wow.
my field of research. I first tried to get some people in the School of Education at Boston College or at Harvard, where there were people at Harvard who claimed to be interested in democratic education. I thought they would be interested in this school, but they weren't. But I couldn't get anybody to do the study. So I decided, well, this isn't my field, but if this study is going to be done, I guess I'm going to have to do it myself. And so,
Oh, good on you,
with the
Peter.
help, with the help of a part-time staff member at the school, David Chanoff, who helped to make contact with basically all the people we defined as graduates. So this was
Mm.
a long time ago, but the school had already been in existence at that time for about 12 or 13 years. So there were some kids who had left the school at graduation age to go on with life, who had never done schooling anywhere else.
Mm.
But there were many others who had done part of their schooling there. And so we defined a graduate as anybody who was at the school for at least the last 2 years of what would have been called high school someplace else,
Yeah.
and then left the school for something other than more secondary education. Um, and so that's the way we defined it. Now, most of them had been at that school at least through what would be the 4 years of high school uh, in another school.